Hey, I'm just here creating content that I'd want to watch myself. If you're into real, simple, and honest videos, go ahead and subscribe.
The moment a woman I had never seen before leaned close in the pharmacy aisle and pressed a folded note into my coat pocket, whispering, "Don't sign anything until you read that." I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. She was gone before I could turn around. By the time I reached the door, there was no one matching her description in either direction on the street. I stood on the sidewalk in the November wind, with a folded piece of paper burning a hole through my coat, and no idea that my life was about to split in two. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at a small hospital in eastern Tennessee, and I spent 33 years married to a man named Thomas who believed in hard work, straight talk, and the particular kind of quiet that only comes from living on land your family has held for generations. Thomas died 18 months ago. A heart attack, the doctor said. Sudden, clean, nothing anyone could have predicted. That was what I had been told. That was what I had believed. The pharmacy was 6 miles from our home, in a town small enough that the hardware store and the post office shared a parking lot. I had driven there to pick up my blood pressure prescription, nothing more. The store smelled the same as it always had, like floor wax and cough drops, and I had been thinking about the heating bill and whether the south fence needed replacing before winter fully settled in. I had not been thinking about my brother-in-law, Raymond. I should have been. Raymond was Thomas's younger brother by 4 years. He had lived in our county his whole life, worked alongside Thomas in the equipment leasing business they built together, and shown up at the funeral with red eyes and a firm handshake. I had always kept a careful distance from Raymond, not because of any single incident, but because of the accumulation of small ones, the way he sometimes spoke over me at family dinners. The way he had looked at the farmhouse the day we buried Thomas, standing at the edge of the yard and staring at the property line, the way you look at something you are calculating. His wife Diane was polished in the way that makes you feel slightly underdressed. She brought casseroles after the funeral and asked questions about the estate with the kind of gentleness that is not actually gentle at all. They had been coming around regularly since Thomas passed. Checking in, they called it. Helping me understand the paperwork, they said. Thomas's business had been dissolved at his death, and the remaining assets were being settled. There were documents. There were always documents. The week before the pharmacy, Raymond had brought a thick envelope to my kitchen table and set it down with the careful deliberateness of someone who has rehearsed the motion. "This is the final transfer agreement," he said. "The business accounts, the outstanding equipment contracts. Once you sign, everything settles cleanly, and we can all move forward." I had told him I wanted to have my attorney look at it first. He had smiled and said, of course, naturally, "Take all the time you need." And then Diane had mentioned how expensive attorneys could be for something so routine, and Raymond had added that Thomas had always trusted him to handle the financial side of things, and by the time they left, I was holding a pen I did not remember picking up. I had not signed. Something stopped me. A stubbornness I inherited from my mother, maybe, or just the nurse in me that still believed in reading before acting. But the pen had been in my hand, and that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Back in my car outside the pharmacy, I unfolded the note. The handwriting was small and even. It said, "He changed the beneficiary on the key man policy 9 days before Thomas died. The signature is not Thomas's. Do not sign anything. Call this number after 9 p.m. Ask for Carol." I read it twice. Then I sat very still for a long time, watching a pickup truck idle at the intersection, and a woman push a stroller past the hardware store window, and the ordinary world continue moving around me, as if nothing had cracked open. I drove home on back roads out of habit, the long way that cuts through old farmland and crosses the creek twice before reaching our gravel drive. I needed the time. I needed to think before the house absorbed me back into its routines. The property stretched around me as I pulled in. 40 acres, pasture and woodlot, the old pond Thomas's grandfather had dug, the barn we had painted together the summer our youngest left for college. Thomas had loved this land with a specific and personal devotion. He walked it every morning before breakfast. He knew where the ground went soft after heavy rain, and which fence posts had been replaced, and which were original, and which trees had come down in the ice storm of 2009. He would not have signed anything without telling me. I sat in the kitchen until the light outside turned gray, and the refrigerator cycled through its hum, and I stopped trying to explain away what the note said. At 9:15 I called the number. It rang 4 times. Then a woman answered, her voice steady and low. "Is this Margaret?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I am Carol Webb. I was Thomas's accountant for 11 years. I am sorry I had to reach you that way. I have been trying to figure out the right moment for 3 weeks. And when I saw you in that pharmacy today and Raymond's car outside on the street, I stopped waiting for a better option." I pressed my hand flat on the table to keep it still. "Raymond was outside?" "Parked 2 spots down. He follows your schedule. I have seen it more than once." She paused. "Margaret, I need to tell you some things that are going to be hard to hear. I need you to listen before you respond. Can you do that?" I said I could. She told me that 8 months before Thomas died, she had noticed irregularities in the business accounts. Small amounts at first, transfers that had no corresponding invoice, payments to a vendor she could not verify. She had brought it to Thomas quietly. He had gone pale in a way that told her he had already suspected. He had asked her to document everything and say nothing. She told me that Thomas had hired a private investigator, that the investigator had found that Raymond had been diverting business income for almost 6 years, not catastrophic amounts all at once, but steady and deliberate, adding up to something significant. She told me that Thomas had confronted Raymond 2 months before his death, that Raymond had promised to repay everything and dissolve his stake in the business, that Thomas had agreed to give him time rather than prosecute because Raymond was his brother and Thomas was that kind of man. My throat felt very dry. She told me that the key man insurance policy on Thomas had been changed 9 days before he died. The beneficiary had been altered to redirect a portion directly to a holding entity Raymond controlled. The signature on the document did not match any other signature Thomas had ever produced in 11 years of business records. She had pulled every one she had to compare. "I believe Raymond forged it," Carol said, "and I believe he knew Thomas was not going to stay quiet forever. I cannot prove what happened to Thomas's heart, but I can prove what happened to that policy, and I can prove what was taken from the business. And I need you to know before you sign anything that document Raymond brought you is designed to release him from all liability in exchange for a settlement that is a fraction of what is owed." I sat in the dark kitchen for a moment without speaking. "How long have you known all of this?" I asked. "I have known about the accounts for 8 months. I have been afraid," she said simply. "Thomas warned me to be careful. He said Raymond was capable of more than I realized. After Thomas died so suddenly, I became very careful. I am sorry it took me this long." I thanked her. I told her I would call her back. After I set the phone down, I walked to the window and looked out at the dark yard and the tree line and the barn, and I felt a grief so specific and so cold that it was almost like a new thing, separate from the grief I had been carrying for 18 months. Not the loss of my husband, but the possibility that his death had not been what it appeared. I did not sleep. In the morning, I went to Thomas's study, which I had been avoiding since the funeral, the way you avoid a room that still holds the shape of someone. His desk was exactly as he had left it, which I had believed was a comfort, and now understood might also be a record. Thomas was a man who kept things, not sentimentally, but systematically. He had files organized by year, going back to 1987. He had a habit of writing brief notes to himself on index cards and tucking them into the relevant folder. He believed paper outlasted digital because paper could not be remotely deleted. I sat down in his chair for the first time. The filing cabinet to the left of the desk held the business records. I started at the back and worked forward, the way he would have wanted. For 40 minutes, I found nothing unusual. Then, in a folder labeled simply with the previous year, and the word personal in Thomas's blocky print, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I had seen it on grocery lists and birthday cards, and the margins of books, and the little notes he sometimes left on the kitchen counter when he left early. I sat with it in my hands for longer than I should have. "Margaret," it began, "if you are reading this, then something happened before I could fix it myself. I am sorry. I want you to know first that everything I did was to keep you from having to know any of this. I was wrong to protect you that way. You were always the stronger one. Raymond has been stealing from us for years. I know that now with certainty. I confronted him, and I believed him when he said he would make it right. That was my second mistake. The first was not telling you when I first suspected. I have been working with Carol Webb and a man named Dennis Pryor, who is a financial investigator out of Nashville. Everything they have found is on a thumb drive inside the blue dictionary on the second shelf. The password is the address of the first house we rented together. You will know it. Do not trust Raymond. Do not trust Diane. Be careful with the attorney they recommend, because I believe he is connected to them. I love you. I am sorry I left this for you. I believed I had more time." I set the letter down and pressed both hands against the desk and looked at the ceiling until the burning behind my eyes passed. Then I stood up and went to the bookshelf. The blue dictionary was where it had always been, fat and old, its spine cracked from years of use. Inside the back cover, taped flat, was a small black thumb drive. I took it to the kitchen table and opened Thomas's old laptop, which I had charged and kept meaning to return to the study, and never had. The drive contained 3 folders. The first held bank statements with transfers highlighted and annotated in Thomas's handwriting, typed into a document beside each image. The second held a report from Dennis Pryor dated 4 months before Thomas died, detailing the financial diversion in specific and documented terms. The third folder held photographs. I almost did not open the photographs. They showed Raymond and a man I did not recognize meeting in a parking lot at what looked like dusk. They showed documents being exchanged. In one photograph, partially obscured but legible enough, I could make out a form with a letterhead from the insurance company. I sat back in the chair and understood what I was looking at. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Raymond. "Just checking in, Maggie. Did you have a chance to look at those documents? The title company is asking about the timeline." I stared at the screen until it went dark. He was moving faster now. He had always known about the timeline. He had created the timeline. I called Carol back that morning. I told her about the thumb drive, the letter, the photographs. She went very quiet for a moment, and then said she had been in contact with an attorney in Nashville, not the one Raymond had suggested, but someone she trusted. She said he had been waiting for exactly what I had just described. I said I needed a few days. She said I did not have a few days. Raymond had already filed preliminary paperwork related to the business dissolution. Once it processed, certain evidence would become significantly harder to act on. I asked her what she needed me to do. Over the next 48 hours, I did the things I had been told to do. I sent copies of the drive contents to Carol's attorney through a secure channel she set up. I had my own attorney, a woman I had known since before Thomas died and had never mentioned to Raymond, review the transfer documents Raymond wanted me to sign. She called me an hour after I sent them and used words like fraudulent and coercive without any detectable hesitation. I also did one more thing. I called Raymond. I told him I had looked at the documents, and I was ready to talk. I told him I was confused about a few details, and it would help me to go through them in person. I asked him and Diane to come to the house on Thursday evening. He agreed immediately. I could hear the relief in his voice, and it turned my stomach. Thursday came gray and cold. I spent the morning walking the property the way Thomas used to, going slowly along the fence line and through the pasture and to the edge of the woodlot where the land curved down toward the creek. I talked to Thomas inside my head the way I had started doing after the funeral, not because I believed he could hear me, but because the habit of speaking to him was 33 years old and I was not ready to stop. I told him I was ready. By 7 that evening I had the kitchen lit and coffee made, and the transfer documents Raymond had brought me spread on the table in a neat stack, and I was sitting in my chair with my hands folded and my heart moving very fast inside my chest. The headlights came up the driveway at 7:15. Raymond came in first, carrying a leather portfolio and looking relieved in the specific way of a man who believes a difficult thing is nearly over. Diane followed with a smile that did not involve her eyes. They sat down across from me, and Raymond opened the portfolio, and I watched him look at the documents on the table and relax incrementally. "I appreciate you being willing to work through this," he said. "Of course," I said. I asked him to walk me through the insurance policy change. I watched his face as I said it. Something moved behind his eyes, quick and controlled. "That was a routine update," he said. "Thomas and I discussed it. He wanted to make sure the business interests were protected in case of—" "Thomas did not sign that document," I said. The room went very still. Diane's hand moved to Raymond's arm. "Maggie," Raymond said, and his voice dropped into a register I had not heard before. "You have been through a tremendous amount. Grief does things to perspective. I am trying to help you. You have been taking money from this family for 6 years," I said. "Thomas found out. He confronted you, and 4 months later he was dead." Raymond stood up slowly. "You do not know what you are talking about." "I have documentation," I said. "Everything Thomas gathered. Everything Carol helped him gather. Everything Dennis Pryor found. I have had it reviewed by 2 attorneys in the last 48 hours. Diane looked at Raymond. For the first time since I had known her, the polish slipped. "This is not how this was supposed to go," she said quietly, and I was not sure she meant to say it aloud. Raymond took a step toward me. "Give me whatever you think you have found, and we can talk about this like adults." "The originals are not here," I said. "They have not been here since Monday." He stopped. At that moment, the side door opened, and Carol Webb walked in, followed by a man I had never met, who introduced himself as a special agent with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and asked Raymond to please remain where he was. Raymond did not remain where he was. He moved toward the back door in a way that was almost fast enough and was met by a second agent who had been waiting outside for exactly that reason. What followed was loud and then very quiet. Diane sat down in my kitchen chair and did not speak. Raymond was walked out through the side door. I stood against the counter and watched it all and felt, underneath the fear and the exhaustion and the grief that had just grown a new and terrible dimension, something beginning to solidify. Not happiness, not relief, something older than either of those things. The agents were thorough and professional and gone by 11. Carol stayed until almost midnight. We sat at the kitchen table with tea and talked about Thomas with the particular freedom that comes from no longer having to be careful. She told me things about him I had not known, small dignities, The way he had insisted on paying her full rate, even during the years the business ran thin. The way he had asked about her mother's health every time they spoke. I told her that he had always known the right thing to do. He had just sometimes done it too quietly. She smiled and said that was the most accurate description of Thomas Holloway she had ever heard. After she left, I walked the house room by room the way I sometimes did at night when I could not sleep, touching the walls and the door frames and the familiar edges of things. The study, which I had been avoiding for a year and a half, no longer felt like grief lived there. It felt like Thomas had left something for me in that room, and I had finally been ready to receive it. The weeks that came after were not easy. There were depositions and statements and a great deal of paperwork that made the documents Raymond had wanted me to sign look simple by comparison. Raymond was charged with fraud, forgery, and financial crimes that added up to a list I could barely read through without feeling sick. Diane cooperated with investigators in exchange for considerations I was not privy to and did not ask about. The question of Thomas's death became part of a separate inquiry. I was told not to expect certainty. I was told that 18 months was a long time, and that the circumstances were difficult, and that the evidence was circumstantial in ways that mattered legally. I sat with that for a long time. I still sit with it some days. What I know is this. Thomas found something wrong and tried to correct it the only way he knew how, quietly, carefully, through documentation and patience, and the belief that his brother had some part of decency left to appeal to. He was wrong about that. And he spent the last year of his life walking his property at dawn and keeping secrets he thought would protect me, and leaving a trail he hoped I would never. I needed to follow it. The farm is still mine. The equipment leasing business is fully dissolved, the assets properly distributed, the accounts untangled by people who knew what they were looking for. There was more money than Raymond had left me to believe. Thomas had been careful about that, too. In the spring, I leased the south pasture to a young couple who keep a small herd and are quiet and hard-working, and remind me of us at that age without making me sad about it. I put a bench at the edge of the woodlot, where Thomas used to stop on his morning walks. I do not always sit there, but I like knowing it is there. I went to see Raymond once, at the county correctional facility, on a Tuesday in March, when the drive was still partly frozen, and the sky was the specific flat white of early spring in Tennessee. I did not go because I had forgiven him. I went because I needed to say something out loud that I had only said to Thomas's photograph and the empty room and the night air. When they brought Raymond into the visiting area, and he sat down across the glass from me, he looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically smaller, but diminished in some essential way, like something that had been under pressure for a long time and had finally released. He could not look at me at first. When he finally did, I said, "Thomas loved you. Right up to the end, he was trying to find a way to protect you from the consequences of what you did. That is who he was, and you knew that about him, and you used it." Raymond's jaw worked. He did not speak. "I am not here to hurt you," I said. "I am here because I needed you to know that I know, and because Thomas deserved to have someone say that out loud." I left without waiting for a response. The drive home took 40 minutes, along roads I have known for decades. When I pulled onto the gravel drive and the farmhouse came into view, I sat in the car for a moment before getting out, looking at the old siding and the porch and the barn and the bare trees beyond it all. Thomas had left me a letter that said I was the stronger one. I had not believed him when I read it. I am closer to believing it now. What I know at 64 that I could not have told you at 40 is that strength does not feel like what you expect. It does not feel like certainty or courage or the absence of fear. It feels like continuing, like sitting in the pharmacy parking lot with a note in your pocket that changes everything and driving home anyway, like opening a letter from a man who is gone and reading it all the way to the end. Like doing the hard and correct thing when every easier option is still available to you. Thomas knew something about that. He carried it alone longer than he should have, and I wish he had trusted me with it sooner, and I understand why he did not, and I have made my peace with both of those things being true at the same time. The land is still here. The bench is at the edge of the woodlot. Every morning I walk the fence line the way Thomas did, slowly, knowing every soft patch and every old post and every place where the creak can be heard before it can be seen. Some days I talk to him, some days I just walk. Both are enough. The most dangerous kind of betrayal is not the sudden kind. It is the patient kind, the kind that waits years to reveal itself, hiding inside the familiar shape of family. But the truth has its own patience. It waits inside letters and old laptops and the careful records of people who believed that honesty, even when it costs everything, is the only thing worth leaving behind. I am still here. So is everything Thomas worked to protect. And the truth that was nearly buried with him is finally where he always intended it to be, in the light, where it belongs.